If I told you that a homeless man would stop an armed bank robbery with nothing but his bare hands and military training, you might not believe me. If I told you that same man had been sitting outside that bank for 8 months, invisible to everyone who walked past, you'd start to understand why this story matters. Welcome to Hidden Legends. Before we begin this powerful story of courage, judgment, and hidden heroes, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We're growing every day, and I sincerely thank you for being part of it. Marcus Webb had been sitting on that corner for 247 days. Not that anyone was counting. Not that anyone cared enough to count. Every morning at 7:45 a.m., he'd unfold the same piece of cardboard, prop it against the brick wall of First National Bank, and settle into his spot on the sidewalk. The sign was simple, written in black marker that had faded from rain and sun. Homeless veteran. Anything helps. God bless. He never asked anyone directly. Never made eye contact unless someone spoke first. Never told his story unless someone asked. And almost no one ever asked. The bank employees knew him by sight, but not by name. Some dropped coins into his coffee cup on their way to work. Others walked wide circles around him, phones pressed to their ears, conversations urgent enough to justify ignoring the man on the ground. To them, he was part of the landscape, a fixture, a problem that wasn't quite their problem. But Marcus saw everything. He watched the morning rush, the businessman who always checked his watch twice before entering the bank, the elderly woman who counted her money 3 times before approaching the teller, the young mother who parked illegally because she only needed 5 minutes but always took 10. He noticed patterns, because patterns had once meant life or death. The security guard, Thompson, made his rounds every 47 minutes. The cash delivery truck arrived every Tuesday and Friday at 11:30 a.m. The manager, Mrs. Peterson, always locked the side door but forgot to check it again after lunch. Details, observations, the kind of awareness that had kept him alive in Kandahar for 3 tours, through IED sweeps and night patrols and missions he still couldn't talk about even though the war had ended years ago. But the war had never really ended for Marcus. It followed him home in sleepless nights and sudden panic attacks triggered by car backfires. It lived in his hypervigilance, his inability to trust crowded spaces, his need to always know where the exits were. The Army had given him skills. The VA had given him appointments. Neither had given him a home. After his 3rd deployment, Marcus returned to find his marriage dissolved, his job given to someone else, and his savings depleted by medical bills and legal fees. The transition from staff sergeant to homeless took 18 months. The transition from respected to invisible took about 18 minutes. He'd applied for jobs, dozens of them. But employers saw the gaps in his resume, the address at the homeless shelter, the way his hands sometimes shook when he spoke about his service. They thanked him for his service and hired someone else, so he learned to be invisible. It was easier than explaining why a decorated veteran with 15 years of specialized training couldn't find work. Easier than talking about the nightmares, the anxiety, the way loud noises made him drop to the ground even in safe places. The corner outside First National became his post, not because he chose it, but because it chose him. Close enough to the shelter that he could walk there at night, far enough from the main shopping district that police didn't move him along every few hours. But Marcus was never really just sitting. He was always watching, always ready, because some habits die hard, and some training never leaves you. Tuesday, October 15th, started like any other day. Marcus arrived at his corner at 7:45 a.m., unfolded his sign, and settled against the brick wall. The morning was crisp, with the kind of clear sky that made him think of desert mornings in Afghanistan before the heat became unbearable. Thompson nodded to him. They'd developed a routine over the months. The security guard was retired military too, Navy, and sometimes they'd exchange a few words about the weather or the local baseball team. Never about service. That was an unspoken understanding. By 10:30 a.m., the breakfast rush had died down. A few customers trickled in and out of the bank. Marcus recognized most of them. The insurance agent who always wore mismatched socks, the florist who smelled like roses even from 10 feet away, the college student who counted pennies for her deposits. Normal people living normal lives in a normal world where the most dangerous thing that might happen was a parking ticket or a declined credit card. Marcus envied them their normalcy. Their ability to assume safety, their luxury of not seeing threats in every shadow, not cataloging escape routes, not calculating how quickly they could neutralize an armed threat if necessary. At 10:47 a.m., Marcus noticed the blue sedan. It had circled the block twice, driving slowly, windows tinted dark enough to obscure the occupants. The car wasn't remarkable. Mid-2000s Honda Civic, dented rear bumper, temporary license plate that Marcus couldn't read from his angle. But the pattern was wrong. People didn't circle this block unless they were lost or looking for parking, and there was plenty of parking. Marcus shifted slightly, keeping his eyes on the sedan while appearing to study his phone, a cheap model he'd bought with panhandling money specifically to avoid looking completely destitute. The sedan made a third pass, slower this time. It pulled into a spot across the street, engine running. Marcus's training kicked in, not consciously, not dramatically. Just a quiet heightening of awareness, a subtle repositioning of his body, a mental inventory of his surroundings. 3 exits from the bank, main entrance where he sat, side door to the left, emergency exit in the rear that he'd never seen anyone use. Thompson was inside. 2 tellers visible through the window, Mrs. Peterson in her office. The sedan sat for 6 minutes. Marcus counted. At 10:53 a.m., 2 men got out, both in their 20s, both wearing hoodies despite the warm weather. One carried a backpack, the other kept his hands in his pockets. Marcus had seen this before. Not here, not in this peaceful suburb, but he'd seen the pattern, the posture, the way they moved with forced casualness while scanning for threats. He reached for his phone to call 911, then hesitated. What would he tell them? That 2 men in hoodies looked suspicious, that his gut instincts, honed by 3 combat deployments, were telling him something was wrong. They'd ask his name, his address, his reason for calling. And when they realized he was the homeless veteran from the corner, they'd file his call under probably drunk or attention-seeking and respond accordingly. Marcus had learned not to expect people to believe him about anything, but he kept watching. The 2 men approached the bank entrance, moving in a way that suggested coordination. One would enter first, the other would follow. Classic pattern for a 2-man operation. Marcus made his decision. He stood up slowly, casually, as if stretching his legs, folded his cardboard sign and set it aside, moved closer to the bank entrance, positioning himself where he could see inside through the large windows. If he was wrong, he'd look foolish. If he was right... At 10:54 a.m., the first man entered the bank. Marcus saw him reach into his backpack, saw the flash of black metal, saw Thompson, the security guard, turn with recognition, dawning too late on his face. Marcus was already moving. "Everyone get down!" Now, this is a robbery. The shout came through the bank's glass doors as Marcus reached the entrance. Inside, he could see the first gunman, early 20s, nervous, sweating through his hoodie, pointing a pistol at the tellers while customers dropped to the floor. The second man was moving toward Thompson, who had his hand on his radio but hadn't yet drawn his weapon. Marcus had maybe 3 seconds before the second gunman made it inside, and the situation became impossible to control. 15 years of army training condensed into a single moment of absolute clarity. Marcus didn't hesitate, didn't think, didn't calculate odds or consider consequences. He acted. The second gunman was stepping through the door when Marcus hit him. Not a tackle, a controlled takedown, using the man's forward momentum against him. Marcus's left hand secured the gun arm, his right drove an elbow into the man's solar plexus, and his leg swept to bring them both to the ground in a position where Marcus controlled the weapon. The gun skittered across the marble floor, sliding under a desk 20 feet away. "Gun down!" Marcus shouted to Thompson, who was now drawing his service weapon. "One inside, armed!" The first gunman spun toward the commotion, his attention split between the tellers and the sudden chaos at the entrance. That split-second distraction was all Thompson needed. "Drop the weapon! Security!" But the gunman was young, scared, and running on adrenaline. Instead of dropping the gun, he swung it toward the customers on the floor. An elderly woman, a young father with his toddler, a pregnant woman who couldn't get down fast enough. Marcus saw the gun tracking toward innocent people and made another instantaneous decision. He released the gunman he'd taken down and lunged forward, covering the 15 feet between himself and the armed robber in 3 bounds. His shoulder hit the gunman's center mass, driving him backward into the counter. The gun went off. The bullet went wide, shattering a window, but Marcus was already controlling the weapon, using techniques drilled into muscle memory from countless training scenarios: arm control, weapon retention, pain compliance. The gun hit the floor. Marcus kicked it away and applied a chokehold that would render the gunman unconscious in approximately 8 seconds. "Call 911, he told Thompson, who was standing with his weapon drawn but unnecessary. 2 suspects, both disarmed, situation controlled. The entire encounter had lasted 4 minutes and 32 seconds. Marcus released the unconscious gunman and stepped back, hands visible, non-threatening. He knew protocol. He knew how this would look when police arrived: a homeless man in combat with 2 bank robbers. He also knew that the security cameras had recorded everything. But for the first time in 8 months, Marcus didn't care how things looked. He didn't care about assumptions or judgments or what people thought they saw when they looked at him. For 4 minutes and 32 seconds, he'd been exactly who he was trained to be, and 23 people were alive because of it. The police arrived in 7 minutes, paramedics in 9, local news trucks in 22. By the time Detective Sarah Morrison took Marcus's statement, the bank's security footage had already been reviewed 3 times. The story was clear, unambiguous, and remarkable enough that it would be replayed on every local news station for the next week. "You handled this like a professional," Detective Morrison told him as they sat in her patrol car, away from the cameras and crowd. "Military background? Army. 3 tours. Afghanistan. Specialist training?" Marcus paused. He'd learned to be vague about his service record. People either didn't believe him or they believed him too much and expected things he couldn't deliver. "Some," he said. Detective Morrison studied him. She was younger than Marcus, maybe early 30s, but she had the look of someone who'd seen enough to recognize truth when it sat across from her. "The takedown technique you used, that's not basic infantry training. That's specialized close-quarters combat. The weapon retention moves, the tactical assessment. You controlled a 2-gunman robbery like you'd done it before." Marcus didn't respond. "Mr. Webb," she continued, reading from his ID, "what's a decorated combat veteran doing homeless on a street corner?" It was the question no one had asked in 8 months, the question he'd stopped trying to answer because the answer was too complicated for most people to understand. "It's a long story," he said. "I've got time." So Marcus told her about the deployments and the injuries and the slow unraveling of his civilian life, about the jobs he couldn't keep because of PTSD symptoms he couldn't control, about the VA benefits that helped but weren't enough, about the pride that kept him from asking for help until it was too late to matter, about the night he found himself sleeping in his car, then in shelters, then on the street corner where people had learned not to see him. Detective Morrison listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "The bank manager wants to hire you," she said finally. Marcus blinked. "What?" "Mrs. Peterson. She's been watching the security footage. Says anyone who can handle an armed robbery with that level of skill and composure is exactly who she wants on her security team." Marcus stared at her. "She doesn't know me." "She knows enough. She knows you had every reason to walk away today. You're homeless, invisible, with no obligation to anyone in that bank. But you didn't walk away. You put yourself between innocent people and armed criminals, and you did it without hesitation." Detective Morrison handed him a business card with Mrs. Peterson's direct number written on the back. "She's offering you a job, Mr. Webb. Full-time security position, good salary, benefits, training program to get you certified. She says she'd rather hire someone with proven courage than someone with just a resume." Marcus looked at the card, then at the bank, where crime scene technicians were still photographing evidence and interviewing witnesses. What about my record? The gaps? The homeless thing?" "She says she doesn't care about gaps. She cares about character, and today you showed her exactly what your character looks like under pressure." Through the patrol car window, Marcus could see Thompson talking to reporters. The security guard caught his eye and nodded, a gesture of respect between professionals. For the first time in 8 months, Marcus felt something he'd almost forgotten: purpose. Marcus Webb reports to work at First National Bank every morning at 6:30 a.m. He wears a professional security uniform, carries proper equipment, and has an office with his name on the door. The corner where he used to sit has a small memorial plaque now, not for him, but for all the homeless veterans in the city. Mrs. Peterson had it installed as a reminder that heroes don't always look like what we expect. Marcus still struggles with PTSD. He still has bad days, sleepless nights, moments when the world feels too loud or too chaotic. But he has health insurance now, regular counseling, and work that makes use of his training instead of ignoring it. The bank hasn't been robbed since that Tuesday in October. Marcus likes to think it's because word got out. This isn't the soft target it used to be. But mostly, he thinks it's because people see him now. The uniform helps, but it's more than that. When you save lives, when you prove your worth in a moment that matters, people stop looking through you. They start looking at you. Detective Morrison stops by sometimes, usually on her lunch break. She's working on a program to connect homeless veterans with employers who value military experience over perfect resumes. "You started something," she told him last week. 3 more vets got hired by local businesses after your story went public. People are starting to look twice instead of looking away. Marcus doesn't consider himself a hero. Heroes, in his experience, are usually people who don't come home. He's just a man who did what needed doing when it needed doing. But if his story helps one person look differently at the veteran on the corner, the homeless man with the cardboard sign, the invisible person sitting quietly in plain sight, then maybe 4 minutes and 32 seconds changed more than just one day. Maybe it changed how we see the people we've learned not to see. So now I ask you, have you ever walked past someone and made assumptions about their story? Have you ever met a veteran whose service was invisible until circumstances made it matter? Share their story in the comments. Tell us about the heroes hiding in plain sight, the people whose worth isn't written on their sleeve but lives in their actions. Because here at Hidden Legends, we believe that everyone has a story worth telling, and sometimes the most powerful stories belong to the people society has taught us not to see. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it. Help us honor the ones who serve in silence, who protect from the shadows, who prove that heroism doesn't wear a uniform. It lives in the heart. And next time you pass someone on the street, remember Marcus Webb. Remember that you might be looking at someone who once swore an oath to protect and defend, someone who never stopped meaning it.